Good afternoon and welcome to the County Supervisor Forum for District 3. I'm Rabbi Noah Farkas, President and CEO of the Jewish Federation. It's very good to have everyone here today. The Jewish Federation of Greater Los Angeles has been, for over 100 years, the voice of the Jewish community, both inside and outside to the wider community, and we believe very deeply in civic engagement. I'm joined in partnership with the ADL, the Anti-Defamation League, and American Jewish Committee, good friends and good partners in this work. Los Angeles is home to the second largest Jewish community in the United States, the fourth largest in the world. It is also the most diverse, with Jewish diasporas from Iran, Israel, Russian-speaking Jewish communities, and Central American Jewish communities, not to mention long time, over 150-year-old immigration to the United States from Eastern Europe. And Supervisory District 3 spans, both in the city and in the Valley of Los Angeles, the heart of the Jewish community. And it is very important for all of us, I believe, as active, civically engaged Angelenos, to engage in the democratic process of how fortunate we are to live in a country where we can discuss values of deep concern and vote for candidates who represent our views and our attitudes to how the County of Los Angeles will be governed the next several years. It's my pleasure now to introduce one of our partners in this work, Rick Hirschhout, who is the Regional Director for the AJC.
Thanks very much, Noah, and good evening, everyone. American Jewish Committee is among our nation's most venerable human and civil rights agencies. AJC's presence may be global, but our impact is felt in communities across the United States. Here in Los Angeles, we regularly engage with public officials, foreign consulates, and a wide range of community partners, building enduring relationships and helping to shape policy on issues of anti-Semitism and hate, defending Israel's place in the world, and defending democratic values for all. Given the challenges and tremors to our democracy over the past 2 years, we are facing a most consequential electoral season. As we continue to emerge from the pandemic, Angelenos of all backgrounds are contemplating the rhythms of the new normal. We saw some of this play out just yesterday with the start of the new school year. The question of what kind of county, the largest in America, we will be looms large. If we are to give voice to the oft-stated mantra that we really are all in this together, a shared value in our faith tradition, we must recommit ourselves to being truly responsible for one another. Let us dare to imagine a better Los Angeles, a more compassionate city and county, built upon shared values and a sense of humility and gratitude for the blessing of our lives. If ever there was a moment to make this vision a reality, it is now. AJC is honored to co-sponsor this evening's forum and is strengthened by the collaboration with our dedicated partners, the Jewish Federation and the ADL. And we are, of course, grateful to our friend Alex Cohen for leading tonight's conversation. We look forward to a thoughtful exchange that inspires us all to build a better community. It is now my pleasure to introduce my colleague, Jeffrey Abrams, Director of ADL Los Angeles.
Thank you, Rick, and good evening. Good evening to the hundreds of you who have registered and are joining us here this evening. My name is Jeffrey Abrams, and I am the Regional Director of ADL's Los Angeles region. As one of our nation's oldest civil rights organizations, for over 100 years, ADL has been committed to both stopping the defamation of the Jewish people and helping to secure justice and fair treatment to all. Today, ADL's work includes fighting anti-Semitism, domestic extremism, and hate of all forms in our communities. And what better way to fight back than to engage in the issues that are of critical consequence and importance to LA County, as well as strengthening the very democratic process which we all must defend. During our campaign forum earlier this year for Council District 5, I remarked that democracy is not a spectator sport. And by your very presence here this evening, it shows the strength of our democracy while bringing the important information to the electorate at a time when Los Angeles and Los Angelinos are facing so many challenges. We welcome both Senator Hertzberg and Councilwoman Horvath to this conversation and look forward to working with you to ensure our community continues to prosper. And in such a pivotal moment for our community, we too believe that partnership in the Jewish community is critical to achieving our shared objectives. And that is why ADL is so proud to co-sponsor tonight's forum with the Jewish Federation of Greater Los Angeles and the American Jewish community. Thank you for being such great partners and friends in our collective work. And now, without further delay, it is my pleasure to introduce to all of you Emmy Award-winning journalist and host of Spectrum News One's Inside the Issues, Alex Cohen. Alex, take it away.
Thank you so much, Mr. Abrams. My name is Alex Cohen, and yes, I host a nightly public affairs program here on Spectrum News One. You are seeing how the sausage is made here behind you. My show is called Inside the Issues. You can see us here live at 8 o'clock, just a few hours from now. And over the years, I've had the honor of speaking with both of our candidates tonight. I'm really looking forward to this discussion. Before we get going, I want to give my sincere thanks to the ADL, the AJC, and the Jewish Federation of Greater Los Angeles. I know it's going to be a great night. As we've been hearing, the Jewish vote will be a critical factor in this race, the LA County Supervisor District 3 race. And just for some context here, it's a big district. It includes parts of West Hollywood, Beverly Hills, Calabasas, San Fernando, and Santa Monica. Before we get going and explain our rules tonight, I do want to note that ADL Los Angeles, the Jewish Federation of Greater LA, and the American Jewish Committee Los Angeles are nonpartisan 501c3 organizations. And what that means is they do not endorse, nor do they oppose individual candidates, nor do they support a specific party. They do not take sides in electoral politics, and remarks made do not reflect the organization's positions. All right, so with all of that said, I want to formally introduce our candidates this evening. We have with us Senator Robert Hertzberg and Councilmember Lindsay Horvath. Welcome to you both. Our forum tonight is going to include opening and closing statements. There's going to be some questions from me. There's going to be a rapid fire round. Candidates are going to have 2 minutes to respond for each of our questions. There will be some follow-up questions that can be answered within 1 minute. And I just want to make sure that our candidates can see our timekeeper there. We all good? You see what's going? No, not yet. Okay, we'll get working on that to make sure that you can see. You see it? There we go. Okay, great. Very official looking. So hopefully don't make me interject. Let the little blue screen do all the work for us. We also know that many of you submitted questions, and we thank you so much for that. We're going to fold a lot of those questions in. If you've not had yet the chance to submit, please note there's a little Q&A button there that should be on the bottom of your screen, and you can submit questions there as well. So I think we've got all the housekeeping done. We're going to get this forum officially started, beginning with 2 minutes to provide an opening statement. And as the clock starts, Senator Hertzberg, we will begin with you. Go right ahead.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Alex. And thank you, Rabbi, and everybody. I really appreciate it. I'm here in Sacramento, and we just had a day where we were saying goodbyes of the departing senators. It's kind of emotional, but important nonetheless. In terms of the opening statement, things important, I think, is who's Bob Hertzberg? Now, a lot of people, I suspect, can know me over the years, but I'm someone who was born in Los Angeles, one of 5 boys. My dad was a constitutional lawyer who fought a lot of tough fights, and all of our dinner table conversations were about the Constitution. In those days, the Warren Court. He would be having a heart attack today if he saw what was going on, fighting for so many great things. And my mother was the community person who took everybody in, and it was extraordinary. I just want to say this in terms of my opening to kind of get a sense of who I am. You know, I was the head of the Urban Affairs Committee for the AJC some years ago, Vice President of AJC, the head of the Dean's Council at Hebrew Union College, where we helped with Rabbi Hersher put together the Skirball. And most of my life has been in service. But the service hasn't been for government service. It's been in the community, building the Tom Bradley Teen Center in South LA, working at the Lincoln Heights Local Development Corporation in East LA, and also, quite frankly, building bridges. I remember making the introduction to Javier Becerra when he was, I think, running for Congress. I was the chair of his campaign, to Howard and to Henry, or introducing Antonio Villaraigosa and building those bridges. Everything that I did in those days, and which has informed my success as Speaker of the Assembly, where I was elected on a bipartisan basis unanimously, has been somebody, I think, that embodies our Jewish values of building bridges, because that's what we're all about, working with other communities and building bridges. And I can talk about it in the question and answer session. But I think in terms of my service as Speaker, my service as Majority Leader, and my service, most importantly, in the community, whether it was Chinatown Service Center, building low-income housing or whatever, has been in that larger context of who we are and what our values are.
And that is time. Councilmember Horvath, we turn to you for your 2-minute opening statement.
Thank you very much. It's an honor and a privilege to be able to be among all of you tonight, to have this conversation and to talk about the issues that are so deeply important to each of us. I'm grateful for the partnering organizations, the ADL, with whom I stood in a press conference after the attack at Sushi Fumi just outside our city, that hateful attack that we saw, where we had to stand together and call out that anti-Semitism that happened in our district. With AJC, with whom I partnered through the U.S. Conference of Mayors as mayor on a nationwide call to eradicate anti-Semitism, to root it out wherever it's found in our communities, and bringing that work to my work in the National League of Cities on their board. And of course, the Jewish Federation, for whom I am forever indebted, who took me on my first trip to Israel, who showed me in real life the stories that I had grown up with in my faith tradition, and showed me just how important and special a place Israel is and the people are who keep it safe. It's an honor to discuss these issues with you. In my own community, I've worked on the issues that are top of mind for people throughout this district: homelessness and housing, how we keep people safe, getting people back to work in good jobs that afford themselves and their families a good quality of life, how we protect ourselves from the existential threat of climate change, and how we work with partners in our community who reflect and demonstrate our values. In my community, I have partnered with countless social service organizations that are rooted in Jewish tradition to make sure that we are serving those who are the least among us, those who are in most need of our service and care. I know that is the tradition of all the people who are joining us in conversation today, and I'm excited about the conversation that we will have on these issues of great importance. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Council Member. And we've heard a bit from both of you about both of you. Let's turn now and talk about this job itself of LA County Supervisor. Councilmember Horvath, this time we'll begin with you. Can you explain to our audience tonight, in your opinion, what a Los Angeles County Supervisor does and why this election is so important?
Well, a county supervisor is one of 5 people leading more than 10 million people throughout our region, and providing a social safety net for those who need help the most. As I mentioned, the issues that are top of mind include homelessness and housing and how we keep people safe. And it is the County Board of Supervisors who are stewards in these efforts, how we meet the needs of those who are struggling with mental illness or addiction, how we take care of our children in the foster care system, how we reform our justice system to restore public trust and make sure that it actually delivers justice and keeps people safe. How do we make sure that all of these services and more that the county provides are actually meeting people where they are? And that is what is most important. How do we bring people together throughout the diverse communities that are served by the LA County Board of Supervisors, and make sure that we're not making broad sweeping decisions that don't reflect what the impact is on the ground, but instead sincerely consider the impact that is made through the services that are delivered, and make sure that we are neighborhood neighborhood by neighborhood, community by community, actually considering how we best deliver services and support. I believe in my community, we have a great example of how we deliver services in the community, bringing it out of the government buildings and directly out onto the streets and people who to the people who need it most, especially on the issue of homelessness. We have a program that has delivered about an 80% success rate year after year, meeting people where they are with services and support. We work with social service agencies who hire people who themselves were formerly unhoused, which is how we help to build trust. And we do this every day of the week, providing transportation, housing, services, and care to make sure that we are getting people the help that they deserve.
Thank you, Senator Hertzberg. The same question. What does a county supervisor do? Why is this election so important?
Yeah, in California, there's 58 counties. County governments are a weird instrument. Most people don't know what a supervisor is when you talk to them on the ballot and what that means. What happens is the federal governments write checks to provide services, and the state government writes checks to provide services. 34% of the budget at the county is for healthcare. 25% for public assistance, 24% for public protection. Most of that money comes from other governments. So what happens is the counties are the implementers of policies in large measure established at the federal government, social services and the like, or the state government. The reason why I'm running for this is I've been so frustrated as been a check writer, and you write checks to the county and you say, here's $2 billion, here's $5 billion, get it done. I go to neighborhood councils, they want to take my face off because nothing's happening, and it's driving us nuts. So it really is that provider. And so you make those decisions to implement those laws, and the tension that's occurring between the federal and state government is because these checks are being written and the stuff's not happening. Homeless is a perfect example where the county's not, it's like all this money's being spent in addition to the local money that's been authorized, that's not been spent, and nothing's happening. We go write checks, we'd have $2 billion sitting there for mental health. They haven't done anything with it, so it's a really significant, it's the operational arm of so much of what the state government does and what the federal government does, in addition to providing public safety, all the contract cities, and so many other things among the 37 departments in the county. But principally, those relationships are so important. And the reason why I'm running, not just because I see it right up to my nose about what, as speaker, as majority leader, over and over again, where we're in a situation where stuff's not happening and I'm coming in to get it done.
And now the next question is also about budgeting. So we can stay on that topic. And Senator Hertzberg, this time we'll begin with you. One of the components of a supervisor's role is, as mentioned, controlling the $39 billion budget. The question here is, what do you see as your specific spending priorities?
Public safety, public safety, public safety, public safety. People are terrorized by what's going on. We've got cities that are defunding. We have all sorts of stuff that's going on. Public safety is critical. Now, when you ask me that question, I want to give it a little bit sharper point, because, for example, so much of the money, the $38.5 billion that's being spent by the county, is not discretionary. A lot of money comes in from outside, as I said, federal and state. Some comes from property tax. We have a significant surplus now of property tax because the high values of houses that are being sold and our proportionate share of that money, right? So I want to put in public safety as critically important. And I define that in addition to money that we spend, we have a 5.3% surplus because of the sale of housing. And we think that there's going to be even more money coming in, even with these higher prices on housing, even the market's been down. But we have places where in Lost Hills, in Conejo Valley, where they're dying because they don't have enough ferrets at their substation. We've got people all over the place. It's a significant problem. And things like healthcare and other issues are things where the funding is already there. And the other big issue is mental health, in terms of, which I can talk about later, but in terms of what's happening on the street. And again, we have the money. You've got $1 billion in the bank. There's another $1 billion that's about to come to you, and another $1 billion for community college to train people in the mental health area to make sure that we have the appropriate services, rather than locking people up or putting handcuffs on them, but having real teams that can go out, which I'll hopefully talk about in response to other questions.
Councilmember Horvath, your specific spending priorities.
Well, we have a lot of resources in the county budget, but what we haven't seen, and I consistently hear no matter where I go in the district, is seeing them spent in ways that people can actually see made manifest in their communities, especially as it relates to homelessness and housing. LAHSA is charged with addressing homelessness and housing crisis in our region, and yet, and we've asked our residents to pay through Measure H their own way into this service to make sure that housing services and care are provided. And yet we don't see the impact of those dollars. In fact, it feels like it's getting worse, not better. We need to make sure that those dollars actually get out of the county bureaucracy and directly invested into the services that are provided each and every day. Partner with community-based organizations who are doing this work day in and day out, and making sure that the people who are leading on these issues actually have the resources to deliver, which is exactly how we've partnered in my community to make sure that the people on the ground who are connecting with folks are actually empowered with the resources they need. We do need to invest in making sure that we keep people safe, and that is made manifest in a lot of different ways. We need to make sure that law enforcement has the resources necessary to fight violent crime, to stop predators in our communities, and make sure that we are protecting especially our Jewish community centers. I recently authored a Jewish community safety plan in my own city, where I partnered with Jewish community organizations, religious leaders, local law enforcement, and our government staff to identify who has which role in delivering services, safety, and care. And this was informed by and led by a conversation that came from our community, where I asked if a community could offer exactly what you need to be safe, what would that look like? And we worked together to draft this plan, to implement this plan, to fund this plan, and enact it.
So we've come upon, I'm sorry to interject, but time has run out for that one. But here's the good news, Councilmember Horvath. This one is going to go to you first. And it is a follow-up question, which, just as a reminder, means you will have 1 minute for the answer here. To each of you, starting with Lindsay Horvath, what would be the biggest challenge in implementing the budget?
Well, right now, I think the biggest challenge is that we have a bureaucracy that is that we're told must exist because of a court decision as it relates to LAHSA. We need to get the money out of LAHSA, which is not delivering into our communities, and instead, as I said, share it with the agencies and organizations that are delivering the services. And so I would work with county council to see whether we can eliminate how LAHSA is currently structured, or restructure it to have an entity that actually works and is functional, and invest the resources that are needed into delivering services and care. In terms of community safety, we need to make sure that we are setting aside politics that are often getting in the way of very important and meaningful conversations about how we keep people safe, and instead bring people to the table around real practical solutions that people can see in their communities delivering real results, so people can feel safe in their neighborhoods again, and they can feel safe knowing that the county is providing them with the services and support they need, whether that's mental health services, whether that's addiction recovery services, whether that's poverty alleviation, and so many other resources we count on the county for.
Bob Hertzberg, a minute now, and what you see as the biggest challenges for implementing a budget.
Getting 2 more votes. Everything at the county is result. There's 5 members. You need, my job, I used to be a speaker and majority leader, get votes. You get a vote, you pass the law. And so if you can get the votes in terms of what you want to do, you get it done. You know, and getting those votes, meaning that, for example, I mean, I got a hole in my head. I'm going to explode on the issue of the money that's sitting there on mental health. We just in May of 2019, we authorized this incredible program. We got it of Italy for 116 million. We wrote a check to the county, said, here's the money. And they still haven't spent it. And I asked one of the supervisors, said, why haven't you spent it? Oh, that's in Hollywood. It's not in my district. It's about building that coalition to see the larger view when you make your priorities of what you need to do. The whole public safety funding has been clogged up because people who are currently serve on the board don't like this sheriff, which I don't like him, but we got to get past it and get these offices funded for public safety.
All right, we are going to move to a new topic. And since it's a new topic this time, Councilmember Horvath, we will be beginning with you, and this you will have 2 minutes to answer. And this is a question about the economy and housing. According to a recent demographic study by the Jewish Federation of Los Angeles, nearly 1 in 5 Jewish households consider themselves to be financially struggling, either unable to make ends meet or just barely managing to make ends meet. And to make matters worse, 1 in 4 Jewish households, many of whom are financially struggling, spend at least 30% of their income on housing. And this has been, of course, exacerbated to a large degree by the pandemic, followed by rapid inflation. So hearing from each of you, again, beginning with the council member, how do you plan to control housing costs for the Los Angeles community?
Well, one plan that we've already implemented in my community long before COVID was providing a rental assistance program so that people who, but for loss of one paycheck, would otherwise be able to pay their rent and stay in their housing, making sure that people are able to stay in housing they can otherwise afford. Also providing renters with a guaranteed right to counsel, so they are advised of their rights and they have protection and support. We've worked with organizations from CES to Pet Zedek to provide these kinds of services in my community. The rental assistance program, we partnered with National Council of Jewish Women. In my community, we partner with a variety of Jewish social service organizations to make sure that people, as you described, who are in need, are getting the services and support that they need from service providers they can trust. Making sure that housing costs also are addressed in terms of the rising rental costs. We just last night in my community enacted a rental increase limit to ensure that rent increases don't displace people from housing they've been able to afford for a long period of time, and to make sure that we continue to protect people who have been long in this community and now are facing the challenges of inflation, rising costs, and so many other facets of their life. We shouldn't see people paying 50% of their income or more sometimes to their housing costs. It's absolutely outrageous. One of the things that has hurt us in that effort are state policies like the Ellis Act and like Costa-Hawkins that have prevented communities from being able to stabilize those costs. And so what we would like to see, what I hope to see more of is the ability to control those costs at the local level and instead have a local perspective in addressing these costs and concerns.
Thank you. And Senator Hertzberg, over to you now. You've got 2 minutes to talk about your plan for affordable housing.
Thank you so much, Alex. There's a couple of laws that you can't deal with. You can try to talk about them, but they don't change. And one of the bigger laws is the law of supply and demand. We don't have enough housing. Costs are going to go up no matter what the circumstances are when you don't have enough housing. So, period, end of issue. Took us off in tissues, my dad used to say. Probably wrong about saying that, but in any event, it inspires me. But the point is, it's supply. So how do you deal with that? How do you create supply? What's government's role in that regard that's intelligent, right? You can keep stamping down price on rents, but you got to increase supply. The way you do it is this. First, I've been working a $25 billion bond with investor dollars to be able to build housing, new supply housing. So we're going to give you the down payment. So the cost of your house will be the same as what your rent's going to be. And the good thing about owning a place, if you have a fixed rate mortgage at the end of 10 years, the cost doesn't go up and you get to own something and build wealth. One of the bigger issues of cost is we don't give an opportunity for people to build wealth. Secondly, government land. Anytime you build anything, the cost is all the delays and the rules and all that stuff, the cost of land, the cost of building material, and the cost of labor. If we have so much land, I've been meeting with at this county, at the city and the like, at $1 a year, you get a 99-year lease, and the cost of land you can dramatically reduce, whether it's a rental apartment or otherwise, or ownership. And the third thing is, What Jesse Gabriel's working on quite intelligently is this whole covenant issue where we have a bunch of properties in LA County in particular that are going offline that were held and protected for low income, and he's going to protect those. I'm voting for it and supporting it. And lastly, kind of the bridge stuff in the near term, Project Room Key, Project Home Key, Room Key provides assistance, provides cash to help people, and we've helped that pretty significantly.
Thank you for that. On a very related tangent, we're going to talk now about homelessness and encampments. The question this time, it's another 2 minutes. It will begin with Bob Hertzberg. Despite numerous efforts by city, county, and state officials to combat homelessness, sprawling encampments still can be found everywhere. We'd like to know what your plan is to remediate homelessness in both the short and long term. I will also add as prompts to you both that we received questions tonight, curious about whether or not you support the recent decision by LA City Council to expand the ordinance known as 4118, and also your thoughts on Governor Newsom's plan for care court. So if you care to work that into your answers over the next 2 minutes, feel free to do so. Senator
Okay.
Hertzberg will begin with you.
I 100% support the city's plan, 4118 or whatever the number is, to not have homeless people. I watch these, it's unbelievable. You got kids going to preschool. You got people that are walking over dead bodies. You have a motorhome on fire in front of a school. To ask for a 500-foot easement, it's hard. Some few days ago, I was at a pride parade, and some of these folks, these advocates came to me and they said, we're not just going to throw you out of office. We're going to cut your head off. This is a tough fight, but I'm sorry, nobody lives on the streets. It is immoral, it is unhealthy, it is horrible. Now, there's a proper way to do it, but starting out, helping out schools with kids and childcare centers, absolute must, a must, a must. Secondly, I emphatically support the Care Courts plan. I am a co-author of the Care Courts plan and working hard on it. And if I'm successful in the county, I'm going to work on a whole host of other elements that are still needed for the care courts, like training of judges and other things. It's like the drug courts. For those who don't know, this is an idea where when you can take people off the street, instead of taking them to jail, you take them to a care court. You have a whole new process of how to take care of people who have mental health challenges and the like. So I absolutely support it. It's hard in 2 minutes for a guy like me to answer a question. I got a list of 9 things here that I just put down of things that I'm talking about. But I would settle the lawsuit. Fighting between the governments is crazy. We've got 88 cities. We're not looking at the whole big picture. We're moving stuff. Look, I applaud people that try in their local cities to help out. LA County's 4,700 square miles. This has to be a regional approach where all of us work together to figure out those solutions. We need a single authority where people are held responsible. It's one of the problems with how county government works. Nobody's taking responsibility. No one is legally obligated. And one of the things I want to do is to create that legal obligation, working ground up to pull people together. My time's up.
Councilmember Horvath, over to you.
Yes, we need to make sure that people are provided the housing and services and support that they need to survive. Getting people off the streets, a housing first approach, is what we've seen has delivered success and is what will keep people safe and healthy. We need to make sure that people are connected with the services and care that will also help them stay off the streets longer term. That might mean moving people who have found community in an encampment with 5 other people, moving all 6 of them together to make sure that they have that same community when they move into housing. Sometimes it's making sure that they are provided with addiction recovery services or mental health support. I think what's missing from the 4118 conversation is exactly that. How do we help the people who need the help the most instead of just saying they have to get out of certain spaces? Where will they go? How will we help them? And what are we willing to do to ensure that they are safe when they leave those spaces? And I think that's where we need to be focusing the conversation, because that's where we're going to find success. In the process that I described from my own community, we actually follow people through the system, whatever services they're provided. And we also have an inclusionary housing policy to make sure that wherever housing is developed, and we must develop housing in order to meet the need. I agree with my opponent there. But it's which kind of housing are we building and for whom? And inclusionary housing provides a critical resource to make sure that people of all income levels can safely live in a community. And we provide this in my community. In fact, a man who was sleeping on the steps of my campaign office back in 2011 was there because he couldn't find a place to stay with his dog. We got him onto a list in our community. We got him services and support. He now lives in permanently affordable housing in our community, is working and taking care of himself because we provide those services. And there are countless success stories like that. I know that what we have works. It just needs to be scaled. Yes, it does need to work at a regional level, but in order for something to work at a regional level, you need a plan to actually implement, which I actually have to do. I'm going
to jump in there just because the timer's up, but fortune is in your favor, Councilmember Horvath. This is a follow-up question on that. It is a minute, and I believe much of your answer addressed this question we're about to ask. So if you'd like to continue going with where you were headed, we'll give you a minute for that. But Senator Hertzberg, since we'll go to you next for this minute follow-up question, the question is, how do we exercise compassion towards those who are struggling? Councilmember Horvath, the first minute goes to you.
Well, to finish where I was going with the care courts, I do think that it is a step in the right direction, so long as we aren't violating people's civil rights. It's not so long ago, you might imagine. It's particularly important to me, this example, that it's not so long ago that the LGBTQ community was persecuted, that their sexual orientation was seen as a mental illness and treated accordingly. We need to make sure that we are respecting people's rights and treating people with care, dignity, and respect. And so long as that's what is delivered through the care courts, I think that is a step in the right direction, but that's something I'll be watching closely. And I think we all should want to watch closely, because as we deliver these services, we want to be proud of what we're delivering to our community. We don't want to just be pushing people over boundaries, pointing fingers, and trying to abscond ourselves from responsibility. We need to make sure that we're stepping up, stepping in, and doing the work and rolling up our sleeves. That is what this job requires, and that's what I'm prepared to do.
Thank you for that. Senator Hertzberg, a minute to you on the role of compassion when addressing the crisis of the animals.
Well, I just want to add one other thought, if I could, about compassion. I have a daughter that's going to be 2 years old next month. I couldn't imagine that it's unreasonable in the balance of her safety and her interests against moving people 500 feet, and to give compassion for them and for the mothers that don't have the money to drive their kids to school, to get past that, to have to walk there. I think that when we in government have to balance out those things. In terms of the compassion, the care courts is quite brilliant. Basically, what happens is kind of two elements here. It's one, it's you first of all, you have people on the street that we just paid $1 billion for to train. We have $2 billion in the bank to pay for them. So instead of having a cop show up with guns and handcuffs, you show up with a mental health team. They take you through the care court system. One of the big roadblocks we have is the interim housing piece, which I can talk about in another answer, hopefully, because I'm running out of time. But clearly how we approach folks. But you got to do it in a way where you got to get people off the street, because you got to care for everybody and look at the big picture in terms of whose interests you're serving.
All right, we've moved to what I like to feel is the fun part of our evening. This is going to be the rapid fire, just to get a little bit of variety of rhythm here. So you get 30 seconds each for the next 4 questions. Bob Hertzberg, we will start with you on question number 1. 30 seconds, first decision as county supervisor if elected.
First decision, try to settle the case. Work in advance, settle the homeless case so we can work and stop the fighting between the city, and then that's the decision. There's other things to do, but that's what I would do. Settle the case on homelessness.
Fantastic. Lindsay Horvath, over to you.
I would say how we deal with LAHSA and getting a more effective organization leading our efforts on homelessness.
All right, you guys are zipping through these. This is great. I think you'll be able to zip through this one as well. 30 seconds, Lindsay Horvath, starting with you. Would you support an anti-BDS resolution from the Board of Supervisors?
Yes.
Bob Hertzberg.
I support it. I'm the principal co-author of the measure with Assemblymember Bloom. I've been fighting at the Democratic Party of all this crazy stuff that they're doing. We're fighting all across the board. I've been doing it for years, and you're damn right I would do it. Not a question.
All right, Bob Hertzberg, you first. What is your favorite place in District 3 and why?
My house. Because my family's there. And I love spending time there. I mean, you're out in public and things like that. But yeah, literally, I live in Van Nuys on Langdon, and I love being home. I've got a great place to hang, and I invite people over like crazy. And I'm kind of the homebody person, even though you know, I've had parties there. People have been to my fundraisers or other parties or meetings or discussions and stuff. I'm just really comfortable there. I love hanging out with Athena Grace and with Kate.
There you go. Lindsay Horvath, over to you. Your favorite place in District 3 and why?
I love my community as well. I think West Hollywood is one of the most special places, not just in our county, but in the country. But I also have to give a shout out for the Santa Monica Mountains, which I think are a true treasure of our district, very much worth protecting and fighting for. I know so many people are dedicated to protecting our natural environment, and that's one of the things that really fires me up on the campaign trail.
All right, what will probably be the most fun, but maybe hardest to answer question of the night, starting with Lindsay Horvath. Favorite food? You got 30 seconds.
Oh gosh, corned beef and cabbage, actually. I'm an Irish girl, so it's just a family tradition.
And Bob Hertzberg.
My grandma's matzo ball soup and her chocolate chip cookies were pretty incredible too.
All right, that is it for the rapid fire. Thanks to you both. We got some extra time on the clock, I think, there too, which is great because we've got a lot more longer form questions. This time we're going to be starting with Lindsay Horvath. There will be 2 minutes on the clock. Here is the question. In the past year, violent attacks against the Jewish community have more than tripled. This is according to the ADL's annual audit. How will you protect the safety and security of the Jewish community and other groups who might be in harm's way in the wake of increasing assaults?
I would scale the Jewish community safety plan that I mentioned earlier that I've implemented in our community to make sure that all of Los Angeles County is protected by such a plan. As I mentioned earlier, we worked with Jewish community leaders, religious leaders, local law enforcement, and government officials to make sure that everybody understands their role, that we're proactively engaged in those roles, and that we are working diligently every day to keep people safe, not in reaction to, but in protection of our communities. This includes proactive outreach from law enforcement and from our government officials to make sure that contact information is current, that we have an updated list of contact leaders in our community, that we also make sure we know when Jewish holidays are taking place. We're aware of national events that might see reverberating impact in our community and actions, as we saw with Sushi Fumi. We also have to work with law enforcement to ensure that they know how to engage and respond, and that we provide community organizations and religious institutions the funding they need to harden their locations to protect and keep people safe, whether it's panic buttons, security guards. You know, as somebody of faith, I don't know what it's like to go into my church and have to go through a metal detector in order to do that. Nobody should have to feel that way, and I'm prepared to fight like hell to make sure that people are safe when they practice their faith.
Senator Hertzberg.
I'll go back, if I could, for a moment to the point you raised earlier about law enforcement. I hear so many stories from folks in the community that I work with that they call the police and no one shows up. Or if the nature of the crime is not too bad, they don't show up. You know, so I just think that we have to increase the number of police just for the presence to help all across the community, to help all of us. Second, we here in the Jewish caucus that we formed since I've been back have fought for $100 million for these not-for-profit security grants. It's been unbelievably successful. Horrible that we have to do so. I mean, I got to tell you, my son got married in April to David Levinson's daughter, Nakatonim, and he had to hire a security guard because he was afraid that what was going to happen at the wedding, what happened in Pacific Palisades, where the people were having a barbecue and people came in. It's a significant challenge, and it's a horrible thing that we have to engage in that. But I think I got to tell you, in terms of kind of my life history, what we've done here in the Jewish caucus, I'll continue those fights with those relationships, continue to fight for additional resources so we can make sure that we're safe. I just was at Brad Sherman's daughter's bat mitzvah at VBS, and we had to walk through magnetometers, man. Yeah, I agree with you, Councilwoman. That's horrible. It just makes you feel terrible, you know, to go to shul and walk through magnetometers. That shouldn't be the case, and all the private security guards, but at least we're helping in that regard. And I'll continue to stay in those fights in every possible way possible.
You both just touched on this, but we do have a follow-up question on this. So you'll each get a minute, starting with you, Senator Hertzberg. We talked about incidents we know where danger and killings have occurred 3 years on from when a shooter opened fire at the Poway Synagogue. The Jewish community here still faces security threats at places of worship. So again, Senator, beginning with you for about a minute, if you'd care to elaborate a bit more on what you would do to protect synagogues and Jewish centers from violent extremists.
Well, part of it is just setting the zero tolerance. And as a policymaker, it's critically important to fight anti-Semitism at every turn, whether it's the swastika stuff. I've done all kinds of things involving those. And also, you know, Barry Worth-Gervin, who's my district director, you know, I stole her from the Federation when I came to government. And you know, it's having an attitude as an office where every time there's ever any incident, she's on the phone to ADL, she's on the phone with the police. You create a culture in your office that you fight like the Dickens. You make sure that anything that happens, you're on it, you're in communication. When I was speaker, I funded a bunch of money for ADL for their various programs for LAPD. It's a whole thought process and a management approach to making sure you protect the community.
Lindsay Horvath, a minute from you on further steps you might want to take to protect places of worship.
Well, I would enact the plan that I've been describing. Another aspect of the plan is a 4-page review that is shared with law enforcement, from law enforcement to our community centers and places of worship, to advise them of rights they have, resources they have, partnerships that are available, and best practices that are advised to make sure that that community centers and places of worship are safe. Having that relationship with law enforcement, knowing proactively how to engage with folks is critically important. But I also think looking at rooting out anti-Semitism wherever it exists in our communities, and doing that proactively through the conversations that we've had at the state, regional, federal, international levels. Also, Jesse Gabriel currently has a bill that I believe has gone to the Senate with regard to hate speech on social media platforms, which have been a significant contributor to the increase in anti-Semitism and the increase in fear that people have been experiencing. And having recently been attacked on social media myself, I feel very deeply the pain that can be caused.
Another follow-up question, so we'll have a minute here from each of you, beginning with Lindsay Horvath, and this one comes from one of our viewers tonight, wondering, you know, given the recent vote by the Board of Supervisors to put a measure on the ballot this fall, which would allow them to remove a sheriff, we're curious your position on that. Lindsay Horvath, we'll start with you. The clock is set for a minute.
It's no secret that I support measures to hold the sheriff's department and the sheriff himself accountable. I would have preferred to see a ballot measure that sees the sheriff directly hired by the county board, like we do with the fire chief, like the chief is hired in the city of Los Angeles. That's not what's on the ballot. What I hope, regardless of what the voters decide on it, is that we aren't relying on that measure to have communication and coordination between the board and whoever wins for sheriff. When I serve as the supervisor, I will put people's public safety first and make sure that regardless of whomever serves as sheriff, that I'm working with the department, as I already do, to ensure safety not only for my community, but all the cities who contract with the sheriff's department. I know intimately from firsthand experience how to work with them and deliver results. I will make sure that that is our priority, not the politics that divides us, but how we hold ourselves accountable to a justice system we can be proud of.
Bob Hertzberg, that question to you. You have a minute.
What I said in my introduction is I'm a bridge builder. I'm not somebody who calls a bunch of press conferences, scream at people. You got to work together. people have to work together. And look, I don't like a lot of the stuff that sheriff's done at all. But what's happened is, I know from talking to the inside, I know from all the law enforcement officials, every single one of them, from the police chiefs down the line who've endorsed me, this attitude that's happening in the Board of Supervisors, this finger pointing, this screaming that's going back and forth, is just tearing apart the ability to get something done. So I don't like it, because I think, as Xavier Slosky, one of my great mentors, said in the newspaper, and I thought he was right when he said it, was the politics is bad. We need to be thoughtful how we make these decisions. It might actually even help the sheriff win, because it looks like, oh, there's a fight between the sheriff and the board, rather than a thoughtful approach to how you go forward. I mentioned on an early debate about this idea of like a commission like the city of Los Angeles, that I'm so happy that the council member has chosen to adopt. I think it's the right thing to do, as a different approach, but not an antagonistic approach. And that worries me about how this is done.
We are going to move now to a different topic. So we'll have 2 minutes on the clock. Senator Hertzberg, we will begin with you. This is a question about transportation. In January, LA Metro was awarded a $1.24 billion amount in government assistance. This is one of many transportation infrastructure initiatives which are being funded in LA County. How would you continue to expand public transit in our region, especially as we get closer and closer to the 2028 Olympics?
Well, first of all, a couple of thoughts on that. Question number one, well, Ben Allen, and I'm co-author of this, is basically putting a plan together that we're working to move all these projects quickly, so we can, it's a 28 by 28 plan to move quickly. But the more important issue is, in my judgment, that's really problematic on public transportation, is safety and cleanliness. You want to tell people, move out of your cars. We're spending billions of dollars to build this huge transportation infrastructure, but folks are scared. They're nervous. You get on there and there's people that are crazy or doing stuff, and we should be taking care of them. We should have people on those various subways and train cars. The Orange Line that I did with Zev, to make people safe. I've also talked to a lot of the workers who clean those and how hard it is. And even some of the drivers, the bus drivers and train drivers, are being threatened. So the idea is, if you're going to have this system, you got to make sure it's clean and safe. And a lot of that money needs to go there. And we put a bunch of money to be able to do that. And secondly, follow what Ben Allen is doing, who's, is one of my great friends. I just finished working on a very big issue with him on plastics and recycling of plastics, one of my great friends who's supporting me. And follow up that, and I think we'll be in pretty good shape in terms of how to use those funds and to be able to expedite on the current system at the Metro.
Lindsay Horvath, over to you. Your thoughts on improving public transportation.
We need to expand our regional transportation network at every level. We need to make sure that we're making good on the promises of measures R and M. That's why people voted for them and are spending their hard-earned dollars to actually get access to transportation. So if we have the money, that's great, but it's only useful if we do something with it to get people out of their cars and onto public transit. I've personally been advocating for the Crenshaw Northern Extension, which I think will serve as a critical north-south connector and have the highest ridership of anywhere in the country, but for a light rail line. But we also need to make sure that the Sepulveda line is realized. The promise of that line is far too important and far too significant for people to abandon that idea. I don't think enough community outreach has been done for people to understand what's coming to their neighborhoods. And I'm concerned because of early discord and division in discussions on that topic, that people will fight it rather than find a way to get to yes. That's what I'm committed to, working with communities to find ways to get to yes, so we serve people's needs. We also have to expand our electric bus system and make sure that our buses are replaced with sustainable vehicles. We need to expand our bike lanes and create protected bike lanes and bike infrastructure so people are able to safely bike from from place to place. That first mile, last mile connection from our major modes of transit is critically important, and making sure that we're actually providing people with resources to do that and do so safely will encourage people to use public transit, to bike safely in communities, which will not only have a significant impact in terms of traffic flow, but also a very positive impact on our environment. And one last shout out for transit-oriented development to make sure our housing is connected to transportation that gets people where they need to go.
All right, a new subject. So we're going to have 2 minutes on the clock. Lindsay Horvath, once again, we'll begin with you. A lot of questions this evening coming in about COVID response, and we're wondering if the two of you could talk to the following. We very narrowly avoided a potential indoor return of the indoor mask mandate. If the numbers begin to climb again as we head into fall and winter, would you support an indoor mask mandate? And do you feel, as some Angelenos do, that the county public health department is too big and too unwieldy to take care of the needs of such a large region? Councilmember Horvath, 2 minutes on the clock for you.
Well, in reverse order, I would say that the issues with the public health department that I've heard did not start or end with COVID. I know that in a community that's hospitality oriented, when we think about our hotels and especially our restaurants who have had to deal with the public health department, they have had inspections where people come and provide them with a checklist of things that they need to address. They address them, somebody else comes out to certify it, and they have a whole new list of issues. We need to have consistency. I would deputize regional public health leaders under the public health director so that we actually have people who know the regions, who know the communities that they're serving, that there's consistency, continuity, predictability for our businesses, and for people who patronize them, of course, for within our communities. But in this time of emergency, we also saw that communication was strained and very difficult, whether you are a local elected official, a business trying to understand how to implement those rules. We would see a press conference at noon from our governor, and by 5 o'clock, we were supposed to implement something locally. And we didn't always have in that period of time clear or direct guidance from the public health department, because it is so large and they had so many issues they had to deal with in implementing what those guidelines were. We need to break it down and regionalize how that service is provided, so that way the issues are addressed region by region. And I think that is a better way to get guidance and leadership out of the public health department. With regard to a mask mandate, I think we have to do what works. We've seen that that wearing masks helps to prevent the spread. And while I want to do everything in our power to prevent that from ever happening, I certainly don't want to see shutdowns happening again, because that contributes not only to the issues that we've seen, but also increased poverty when people don't have access to their jobs. We have to do more to protect and prevent ourselves from getting in that situation. And that's what I would do.
Thank you, Senator Hertzberg. 2 minutes to you.
Thank you so kindly. You know, when you step back on something like this, and is it too big? You need a regional solution. You can't have like an air quality district for Sherman Oaks, right? You can't have a healthcare department for Van Nuys or Beverly Hills. It doesn't work. You need a regional approach. So I would suggest for point number one, it would be dumb to try to break it apart because of the nature of the issues. Two, I do agree that there can be breakdown for purpose of internal management issues. But what I think happened here, first of all, when the pandemic happened, no one knew what the circumstances were. Nobody was vaccinated. There were no vaccines. I got 2 vaccines and 2 boosts. So I'm, you know, I feel great. I got COVID, but I had nothing cold, you know? So there's still very significant issues. I'm not suggesting there's not, but I would suggest it's a very different circumstance. And I want to make kind of 2 final observations in that regard. And I observe this on a statewide basis because I get to see all the counties. And what's happened is, where there was good leadership at the County Board of Supervisors, there wasn't this overreaction by public health officials where they get to control everything. You saw these public health officials that love being on TV for every single day, and I'm running everything, and politicians hiding behind them and saying, well, that's what the public officials say. Our responsibility is to make judgments. We hire experts and we make judgments in our lives, in our work, and everything that we do. And I felt that's what happened here in LA on so many fronts. And I had to deal with so many businesses that were treated in horrible fashion, where it was just this edict and, well, that's what they say. That's a failure of leadership, in my judgment. I'm not big on the mask mandate, absent a huge compelling issue and a huge compelling way to do it, and maybe and to have the minimal amount of issues in that regard. If it's necessary, we should do it. But I just would want to really do an analysis of the facts under those circumstances. And I think that you got, I can't judge the people from before because the circumstances were so different. But I think we're in a much better position now.
We've got 2 minutes this time, starting with Senator Hertzberg to talk about another public health emergency, this time monkeypox. I'm curious what you make of our response so far. And can you talk about what steps you think we need to continue to ensure our readiness for any public health emergency come what may? And Senator, we'll start with you.
Yeah, these public emergencies are tough because so often you don't see them coming. But one of the issues that I've issued a series of releases to try to give some guidance to the county if they would listen to me at all. But, one of the things is that even though in the San Fernando Valley, they had a setup for monkeypox in Encino and one, I think, in South LA, they had nothing in West Hollywood. And now I was just there the other day and I observed that they finally put something at the county building in West Hollywood, the library is, which I'm really happy about in terms of meeting people where they are, so to speak, in terms of the risk. But when you look at it, so number one is I thought they were a little bit slow to the response. Two, I thought that they weren't as regionally sensitive to what they needed to do under the circumstances. Three, part of the larger issue on monkeypox is the whole national issue, the availability of vaccines. Again, it's this early determination, the CDC, and how that works. So I'm not somebody who's out to criticize folks because we don't know yet. Right? We're learning like crazy. But I'm interested in what the county role is, which is implementation, where you set up, what the hours of setup are, how you outreach and deal with communities to be able to communicate with them, which is so much informed by our role where we don't have access. At the state, we've got hundreds of thousands of new doses of vaccines, which are very helpful and that are good. But so it's going to be a problem, and we'll see new issues. I lived through the energy crisis as speaker. I lived through the pandemic in the legislature, trying to figure out how to write laws and to solve these horrible problems during the pandemic, and all this stuff. So it is all about management, and I just think that so much of what's happened at the board and what's causing the dysfunction at the board is that you just don't have the level of communication between the Board of Supervisors and their offices and government. Everywhere I go, Labor Fed has endorsed me. They're all complaining that on all these issues, what happens is they're just told what to do. They read a text, they read a tweet, they read an email, and no one talks to them. No one consults with them. No one engages with them to try to get their opinion to figure out the best solution. It's a management problem.
Councilmember Horvath, over to you.
I don't think we've had enough of a sense of urgency on the issue of monkeypox. I think this has been a long time coming, and I think the county health department also shares in the frustration. The senator mentions that we opened a health center in West Hollywood, or a place for people to get the vaccinations. And that came with consistent urging and demand and public pressure. And I think it is that sense of urgency that I bring in my leadership, and I'm interested in bringing to this seat, because we definitely need it. The county is a behemoth, but they cannot do this alone. Part of the issue that is going on with monkeypox was the slow delivery of supply through the federal government. It took our governor stepping up and declaring a state of emergency, then our county declared a state of emergency. Eventually, the federal government declared a state of emergency. But in the meantime, in communities like mine, where the need was great, where people were crying out for help, we needed it much faster, and we needed people checking in and paying attention. Part of the issue, I'm told, is a supply chain issue. Part of the issue is the sites that we're choosing to distribute the vaccines. There are community health clinics and community health centers, particularly in concentrated communities of color that are not deemed appropriate locations to be providing these vaccines, yet they are the only locations where people trust to go get a vaccine in their community. And we already know that the vaccine, that availability and accessing of vaccines was particularly challenging in communities of color. So we have to work with our trusted community partners and allies, get the resources into the communities where they're needed, and make sure that people have the resources that they're counting on from the county. That doesn't happen by sitting back and waiting for another level of government to do it for you. You got to step up and do it yourself. And that's what we've done. And that's what I will do here.
One final topic, one more 2-minute question, beginning with Councilmember Horvath. We're speaking in the middle of, some more 90-degree days. The state is just in the midst of serious and extreme drought. And then the latest report says a mega flood could displace millions of Californians. There is a lot going on with our planet. How would you plan to promote and expand green initiatives in District 3?
I would work with the partners who have endorsed me in this race, from the Sierra Club to the League of Conservation Voters to the Center for Biological Diversity, to former State Senator Fran Pavley, who has endorsed me, and working with my partners on the Clean Power Alliance, which is now the largest CCA now in the country, working together so many communities and cities from Los Angeles County and Ventura County to deliver clean energy, give people a seat at the table, and have direct responsibility over how energy is generated, created, and delivered. We need to realize and fully fund the Our County Plan, which was informed through a bottoms-up approach. Shout out to Pacoima Beautiful, which really helped to lead the effort for District 3, and make sure that the community input that was provided into that plan to make sure that we're taking care of our environment and thinking about a sustainable future and building a sustainable future is actually realized. Again, it's not enough to simply have a plan. You have to implement it, you have to fund it, and make sure those results are being delivered on the ground. Because I have relationships with all of the cities that contract for service with the county, having served as president of California Contract Cities Association, and having partnerships with local officials in every city in this district and throughout the county, I'm uniquely positioned to be able to bring that information from the county, partner with local governments, and make sure those standards are implemented locally. Where I led this in creating our own city's climate action plan and climate action adaptation plan to make sure that we are thinking about a clean energy and sustainable future, whether it's sustainable development practices or recreating our natural habitat. We need to make sure that we have a committed steward, and that is what I intend to be in this seat.
Thank you, Senator Hertzberg. 2 minutes to you to talk about your plans, green plans for District 3. And I know this will be our last answer before we turn to closing statements.
I was speaker during the energy crisis, and I have energy crisis PTSD when the lights went out. We're trying to figure out the elegant difficulties of transitioning from a fossil fuel economy to a clean economy. At the same time, climate change is creating the extreme heat. It's not just climate change, it's climate changed, and now the threat of floods and all the other issues. So I read this plan. It's 12 sections. It's 159 recommendations. It's all these aspirational things, which are all great. And like, let's do this and we should do this. I'm sorry, when I left government, I went and formed a solar company in South Los Angeles on Martin Luther King Boulevard, because I couldn't stand all the people that sit there and talk about plans. And I wanted to do something about it. I used to go to folks and say, how many pounds of carbon did you reduce in the atmosphere? Then I went overseas to Cardiff, Wales, and formed another company and traveled all around the world in China and Africa and won the World Bank Award for Rwanda. And one of the 50 people that saved the planet, of which there were only 4 Americans, and nobody on the panel was from America. And what motivated me in large measure to come back to government was climate change and this issue. because we all focus on these stupid press conferences and a 20% of this and a plan for this. How do you get it done? How do you convert those transformers from 4,000 watts to 20,000 watts that are required on those poles? How do you pay for it? What does that actually look like? Where do you get the money to make that transition? How do you deal with the extreme heat and where the money in the meantime? So one of the principal reasons that informed me coming back in the government a few years ago, to come back after I was gone for 12 years, was dealing with this whole issue of climate change and energy. I have bills on transmission and renewable resource adequacy and all these things that never get you on the front page, all of which are essential. So for me, the green plan is all about implementation. Probably have to raise $25 billion, local businesses, put the infrastructure together to actually make the conversion. That's what I know how to do.
Thank you for that. And thank you to all of our audience members tonight for submitting such great questions. We do have to wrap up shortly, but not before we hear closing statements from each of our candidates. We'll begin with Senator Hertzberg. You have 2 minutes when you're ready.
Yeah. Thank you so much. And thanks everybody for all your civic engagement and participating in the community. It's the only way democracy works. I really appreciate it. I can't see who's on this call now, but I'm sure a lot of friends are here, been involved with over the years and the like. You know, I just got to say this, you know, I'm not running for another office. This is not politics for me. This is fear. This is very deep concern about what's happening with the county, the lack of leadership, and trying to put my neck on the line when people tell me they're going to chop my head off to engage in public service. I have a lot of options in my life, but I have a certain DNA in who I am, a certain ethic, a certain soul. And I couldn't walk away from the relationships and the abilities that I have and have a deep understanding of how to make things happen, to get things done, to work in partnership with people in all corners of the county, people I've worked with for years and whom I have great confidence and respect, to be able to do stuff that, you know, just pushing the envelope to make it happen. And so, you know, I think you got some pretty good sense in terms of the questions that I've answered and where my head is at and how I see public safety as a big issue, how my approach to these kinds of issues are practical. But this is who I am. And particularly with respect to the community, 20 years ago when I had solar and you had a problem, they called me, I fix it. You know, 20 years ago, it was Ev and I were doing the orange line, and you know, we had to deal with what's called the sabbatical light, so that the Orthodox community could get across the orange line in the community to go to shul, you know, to fix it. Yeah, be a voice, a rational voice with some sekel and, you know, and knowing how to get stuff done. I'm going to work hard, but I don't measure. I don't calculate. I tell you how I see it. And if I'm right, I'm right. I'm wrong, I'm wrong. I'll course correct, but I'm in it for the right reasons. I'm in it with the right level of experience and know how to get stuff done. And that's what I'm going to do. And that's why I'm doing this, running for this office to do this job.
Councilmember Horvath, your 2-minute closing statement.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate this opportunity and thank everyone who made it possible. I'm incredibly grateful for the conversation that we've had and will continue to have on the campaign trail. And I hope that many of you will choose to join the coalition that we're building, not just to win this campaign, but to transform how we will serve and lead LA County for the better and create a brighter future. I commend the senator on his many years of service, and I would argue that 21st century problems require 21st century solutions. That is why I'm in this race, to bring practical, pragmatic problem solving to this seat and to the issues that are facing people, no matter where they are in this district. We need somebody who's going to hands-on deliver the results that people are looking for on homelessness and housing, on safety, on protecting our environment, delivering transportation solutions, and improving the quality of life and affordability for people who need help the most. I'm proud in this race to be endorsed by the Israeli American Civic Action Network and to have the highest support from the Democrats for Israel. And I regard these endorsements incredibly of high importance to me because of the Jewish population that exists in our district, but more importantly, the partnerships that they represent and the ways that we can work together to solve problems and address the concerns and fears that people have the most. I've earned these endorsements and this support because of my work in the community, leading my city to be the first on record to stand firmly opposed to BDS in all of its forms, and make sure that we are a leader in this conversation, not just responding to it, that we are leading in rooting out anti-Semitism in the original proposals on ethnic studies, that we support education about the Holocaust and fight Holocaust denial wherever it has shown up on the globe, that we stand strongly and firmly in support of our Jewish community in a time where anti-Semitism is on the rise. The Jewish community deserves strong allies, which is exactly what I have been and intend to be in this seat. Thank you for your time and your conversation today.
Thank you to our two candidates so much. That is going to wrap it up for our forum this evening. Again, I want to thank ADL Los Angeles, the American Jewish Committee Los Angeles, and the Jewish Federation of Greater Los Angeles for being such great hosts this evening. Of course, I want to thank both of our candidates for answering with honesty, integrity, and speed. That is the magical combination we always look for. And of course, I want to thank you, our audience, the voters, for participating in tonight's discussion. And of course, the work does not end there. A friendly reminder that the last day to cast your vote in this election will be Tuesday, November 8th. Please do vote. Again, my thanks to all. Thank you so much and have a great evening.
Thank you.
Bye.